Good evening, everybody. Tonight's Shir B'ezrat Hashem is going to be called Korach and the Color of Heaven. What is the color of heaven? The color of heaven is techeles, which is a kind of blue color. At the end of last week's Parsha, the Torah talks about tzitzis. The word tzitzis comes from the verb latzitz, to peek. Tzitzis allow us a peek. And what do they allow us a peek into? So, at one point in Jewish history, when the identity of techeles, which comes from a mollusk called the chilazon, was positively identified, the strands of the tzitzis were 3 white and 1 was blue. White is the beginning of all color. White, if you take the 3 primary colors, which are red, blue, and green, and you put them on a wheel and you spin them, you'll get white. It's a kind of rather murky white, but actually white is the beginning of all color. The primary colors emerge from white. White is where color begins, and the end of color is techeles. Techeles, what is the color of techeles? If you look up into the sky on an unclouded day with no clouds, and you look as far as you can see, if you look into distance itself, that color is techeles. It's blue. Techeles is the color of beyond. So really that's the whole spectrum of color, sorry for the pun, from white to blue, from the beginning of all color to the end of all color. And the tzitzis allow us to peek into what is beyond, quite literally. The 3 threads of white denote our point of departure, and the blue one is our point of arrival. And conceptually, of course, the beged to which a tzitzis are attached has to be a 4-cornered garment. Now, we talk about the 4 corners of the world, and although that's not something we understand literally, I'm not sure it ever was understood literally in that sense, but certainly the 4 cardinal points by which we conceive of direction, direction of hispashtus, of spreading out. This world is nominally, definitionally, the 4 corners of the world, the 4 directions. This world, so to speak, is like the beged of the tzitzis, and the beged on which the tzitzis are attached to. That's this world. And the tzitzis allow you to go beyond the world, to expand your reach, so to speak. The word tzitzis, another word for tzitzis is gedilim. Gedilim. The Torah calls tzitzis also gedilim. Gedilim is from the root of gadol. Gadol means great, or adult actually. A gadol as opposed to a katan. We've spoken about this in previous years, but a katan, somebody who is small, a minor, a baby. Katan is connected to the word katua, which means, actually we have the same word in English, katua, it's an Aramaic word, katua. Why is a katan katua? Because the worldview of a katan is extremely extremely limited. A baby is prepared to wake up an entire continent if it has a tickle in the back of its throat. But you give that baby a popsicle, he's as happy as Mashiach has come. That's nothing could be better than that. Take the popsicle away, the world has come to an end again. A katan has a very limited span. He doesn't have the ability to connect, doesn't have the ability to move outside of his little 4-cornered world. The idea of tzitzis are to take us beyond. And the word, as we said, gedilim, is connected to gadol. Gadol is the opposite of katan. It says in the Pasuk when describing the tribe of Gad. Gad, says Yaakov, Gad gudud yigudenu. Gad is a marching troop. In fact, gudud is the word in modern Hebrew for a platoon. The whole idea of a platoon, of a troop, is that it marches forward. The whole idea of a gadol, somebody who is adult, is able to stitch the individual disparate moments in his life into a single, cogent, coherent march forward, which is why if you've ever had the schus to meet an Odom Gadol, a great person, they're all very different. But one thing that I found in my limited experience that they share in common is they're all able to take all of the disparate things that's going on in their lives and to stitch it into a single life purpose. Nothing goes out to the sides. We live in a generation where we're fighting all the times the weapons of mass distraction. right? The phones in our pockets, every day, now this, over here. I don't know about you, but I find it very difficult to be a gadol, to be focused. Because the world we live in is based on distraction, for whatever purposes that may be. Usually it's so people can make money from you. But the whole idea of being a gadol is that no, everything in my life is focused. That's a gadol. Gad, gudenu. And principally that focus has to be beyond this world. That is what the tzitzis are supposed to do, to take us beyond this world. Gedilim, gadol. The Gemara in Brachos describes what the blue of the tzitzis represent. It says the blue of the tzitzis is domeliyam. Domelam, it's similar to the sea. Now the sea is something which left to itself would be infinite. The pasuk says, Samti gvul yam, bal yavorum, bal yeshuvim, bal yavorum lechasosas haaretz. The sea left to itself would swamp the earth many, many times. But Samti gvul yam, says Hashem, I've placed a boundary for the sea. Hashem places the sea in its place. It's held back. Its nature, in essence, is infinite, but it's held back by the shore. Samti gvul yam, bal yavorum, and it can't pass over that. In fact, Chazal say that every wave in the sea is the sea's, so to speak, expression, its desire to swamp the land, but it's held back. It can only make this attempt, and then it pulls back. So the blue of the tzitzis, the tcheles, is dome, similar to the blue of the sea, which is our first step on our journey to infinity. And the blue of the sea is dome to the blue. The tcheles of the yam is dome la rakia. The rakia is one of the levels of heaven, which is blue. It's the color blue. That's what we're talking about. That's the blue beyond. That's the color of heaven. That color of the sea is like the blue of the heaven, which is also beyond. That's pure distance. Distance without end. That which is without end. And the Gemara finishes off by saying that the blue of the rakia is dome of the blue, the tcheles of the kisei hakavod. The kisei hakavod is nothing we really can talk about. The kisei hakavod is a concept in Kabbalah. I can translate the words. The words mean it's a throne of glory. So to speak, again, words break down at this point, that Hashem, so to speak, sits on a throne, and that's called the kisei hakavod, and that is a reflection of that which is truly Ein Sof. So the whole idea of the tzitzis is to connect us outside our little four-cornered world. Now it's interesting because in this week's Parsha, one of the challenges that Korach brings against Moshe Rabbeinu it says, Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kohas ben Levi v'dosim v'aviram ben Eliyav v'oin ben Peles b'nei Reuven ... And Korach took. Korach was who? The son of Yitzhar, the son of Kohas, the son of Levi, the son of and Dosim v'avirim, who were the sons of Eliyav, and On ben Peles, the sons of, who were all the sons of Reuven, and that's it. That's the end of the sentence. It doesn't say what he took. It just says Vayikach. Korach was the essence of taking. Taking where there's no giving. Rashi says on that pasuk, Vikach Korach, Lokach et atzmo letzad echod lios nechlak mitoch ha'eda. Korach took himself to one side. He removed himself from the rest of the nation. As it says, Vayikach, translated in Aramaic, is Vayis Paleg. He separated himself. What is the message of Korach's taking? And what is this idea of Vayis Paleg? We'll come back, to this word Paleg. And the challenge, the famous medrash, the Rashi brings, one of the things that Korach challenged Moshe was as follows. It says in so he took 250 Maasa, Ahmad. What was this idea of his mispaleg, his dividing himself, his separating himself? He stood up in the Kanas Reish Nun Roshe Sanhedrios. He took 250 heads of Sanhedrins. Reuben, Meshevet, Reuven, most of them from the tribe of Reuven, etc., 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 etc. And he said to Moshe, and he said, a talis, talises, shekulan techeles, which are all techeles, all the color of blue. They took these talises and they stood in front of Moshe Rabbeinu, Amru lo, and they said to Moshe, talis shekula shel techeles, a talis of all of blue. Chayeves b'tzitzis o patura. Does it still need tzitzis or is it potter from tzitzis? Amar lehem, Moshe said, chayeves. It's a four-cornered garment. We don't care what color the garment is. It needs tzitzis. They started to laugh at him. And they said, Ev shatalis shel min acher. Is it possible that a talis of some other species, other type, meaning other color, or other kind of wool? Chut echad shel techeles potra zu. One thread of techeles can exempt its obligation. Well, of course, the one of blue and the three of the white. But the idea is as follows, that if we can see that something of a different min, which is not of techeles, is potted by one thread of blue, so surely, zu shekula techeles, this talis which is all techeles, lo tipota etzma, can it not exempt itself? What's going on here? Why davka techeles? Why davka tzitzis? What was really Korach's taina? What was going on behind the scenes here? Okay, so now this is where it gets really interesting. Rabbeinu Bachia, or Rabbeinu Bachai as he's sometimes called, draws three psukim, three verses, which link the rebellion of Korach to the men of Sodom and to the Dor HaPalaga, which was the generation who tried to build an ear and a migdal, a city and a tower, to challenge Hashem. And the link is as follows. There's a pasuk in Bereshis, Perek Yud Tes, verse Daled, pasuk Daled, Terim Yishkavu va'anshei ha'ir, anshei Sodom, nosabu alabayis mina va'ad kotten, kol ha'am miktzah. When Lot brought in the Malachim, he didn't realize the Malachim, and the people of Sodom challenged him. Says Rabbeinu Bechaya, the word ear, ha'ir, in this pasuk, the city, gives us a link to another pasuk in Bereshis, which is talking about the men of the Dor HaPalaga, the generation of the dispersal who built what's called the Tower of Babel in secular terms. And this is in Sefer Bereshis Perek Yud Aleph pasuk Daled. This is before. And it says, Hava nivne lanu ir, let us build an ear. Let's build a city and a tower. Barosha, Bashamayim, its head will reach up to the heavens. V'naseh lanu shame, and we'll make for ourselves a name. Now, says Rabbeinu Bachia that naseh lanu shame, the word shame, links to our pasuk of Korach. Our pasuk of Korach says in Sefer B'midah, this week's pasuk, Vayikumu lifnei Moshe. They stood in front of Moshe, Va'anoshim in Bnei Yisrael, Chamishim Mosayim, Nesiei Eidah, princes of the congregation, 250 of them, Kariyei Moed, the callers of the congregation, literally, Anshe Shem, men of name. So we've got ear, we've got from the ear when talking about of Sodom, which links back to the ear of of the Ir Migdal, of the Dora Palaga, and from there the shame, Naaseh Lanu shame, as they said, we'll make for ourselves a name by the Dora Palaga, by the Tower of Babel. That links to our Parsha. Says the Rabbeinu Bachya, they're all linked together. What's going on? They all made the same mistake, basically. And in point of fact, as we said before, Onkelos' translation of Vayikach, the first word in this week's Parsha, which doesn't have doesn't say what he separated. He separated himself. And Rashi says, what did he take? He took himself away. Onkelos translate that as Vayis Paleg, Palaga, which is the same as the generation of the dispersal, the ones who challenged Hashem by building that tower and that city. To divide or separate it. So, as we know that Adam Rishon brought death into the world by eating from the fruit of the tree, man essentially, originally, was created to live forever, and Chaye Olam Nota B'Sochenu, everlasting life is planted inside us. But because of the sin of Adam Rishon, Adam brought so much Ra into the world that it was no longer possible, except in a few exceptions, for man to purify himself to the level that he would be roy to go to Olam Haba. And that's why there has to be death, and there has to be the resurrection of the body, where the body and the neshama will be joined together in Olam Haba. So, we know that the Torah is the Eitz Chaim. It was incumbent on the generation that came out from Egypt, of which, of course, Korach was one of the major leaders. When they received the Torah, they should have been able to, and they were responsible to correct all that was wrong with the world. The world, if you remember, had descended from the time of Adam to the generation of Noach, where essentially Hashem erased the world to a large extent. And then from Noach to Avram Avinu, only one person who recognized there was a God in the world. After Klal Yisrael had been in Mitzrayim for all of those years, and the Yetzer Hara basically had been assuaged, had been appeased through their suffering, they were now they were fit to raise mankind up to the level of Adam before the Chet. That's what it says, it's Har Sinai. Posku mehem zu mason, the original primordial filth of the nachash, of the snake, which had encrusted man and brought death into the world, departed from them, the purity of their standing on Har Sinai and the receiving of the Torah. And they should have been able to fix the world, to be metakein the olam. Unfortunately, though, through Korach's rebellion, instead of bringing tikkun, they reawakened two historical mistakes, which are essentially the same thing. And let's examine that now. The Dora Palaga, the Dora Floga, the Tower of Babel, and Sodom, the society of Sodom. The sin of the Dora Palaga resurfaced with the story of Korach. As we said, there was a unique opportunity to repair the damage. Why did this generation build this city and this tower? Out of a fear that they would be divided. Now, there's a three-way machlokus is actually what it was they were trying to do. There were three groups. The three groups in that generation. One of those groups wanted to climb the tower and quote unquote quote fight. They wanted to fight Hashem. What this means, basically, on a deeper level, is they wanted to sever heaven from earth. It says in the Tehillim, Hashemayim Shemayim LaHashem v'ha'aretz nasan livnei Adam. Hashem, the earth, the heavens is Hashem's, and the earth Hashem has given to man. Quite simply, they wanted to secede. They wanted a world which was independent, which was self-sufficient, where God had no more part to play. Thank you very much. You created us. Fine. We're on our own now. We want independence. We don't want interface. They wanted two independent systems of life. And their idea was based on the fact that if you could unite all mankind behind one idea, if you could truly unite mankind, then that would be a power sufficient enough to force Hashem to sever earth from heaven. Such was the power of unity. They understood that unity is so strong. The Korach of Achdut is so strong that in some way they understood that that would force Hashem, so to speak, to divide the two kingdoms of heaven and earth. And if you remember part of the posuk, they said they wanted to make a shame for themselves, a name. So name, quite simply, means a separate identity. Things are distinguished by its name. They wanted to make a name for themselves. That through this koyach of achdus, and it's interesting because if you look at it from this point of view, it makes a lot of sense now why it was that Hashem came down and destroyed and gave them different languages. So that when somebody said, give me a hammer, he gave them a brick. They couldn't communicate. They couldn't fulfill their purpose. The question is very simply, why did Hashem, so to speak, mix up, balbel their languages in order to make it impossible for them to communicate, and therefore the project failed? Why didn't Hashem just leave the languages all the same and just in spite of everything it failed? So I'd like to offer an answer. And maybe one of the answers is as follows. There's a certain koyach in the world called achdus, which is essential. Unity is something which is essential. Why? Because it says that Har Sinai, Vayichan Yisrael neged achor, and Yisrael in the singular camped opposite the mountain. It says Rashi, Ke'ish echad b'leiv echad, like one man with one heart. The way the Torah has to be given is through achdus. Klal Yisrael had to be one man with one heart. So to speak, if Hashem had shown that unity is not, he would have broken the power of unity forever. Had he not destroyed their individual unity, but had shown that the power of unity is not as strong as you think it is, then that would have meant that the Torah could never have come into the world. Hashem, so to speak, had to preserve the pristine purity of unity, that unity can, if you like, move mountains. Unity is an incredibly powerful thing. You are one, your name is one. And who is like your people, the Jewish people, one nation in the land. This is what we say on Shabbos and Mincha, one of the holiest times of the week. Hashem's unity is based on His name being one, and our unity, when we're in the service of Hashem, creates shimcha, that Hashem's shame is one, that we don't see everything in the world as disparate fighting elements. We see there's a God in the world, and that ultimately leads to Ata Echad on the highest level. But, so Hashem, so to speak, needed to preserve the power of unity, because it's only through the power of unity that the Torah can be revealed in the world. And that's why He destroyed their individual unity. He destroyed the unity of that particular generation. Why? How? By changing all their languages. And therefore the power of unity in essence was preserved. But they took that unity and they used it for themselves. They wanted to secede. They weren't interested in Ata Echad v'Shimcha Echad u'Mika Amcha Yisrael Goy Echad ba'aretz. They wanted to secede. We want to build an Ir v'Migdal. We want to unite everybody, and we want to go up and fight. One of the groups wanted to go up and fight to sever the upper world from the lower world. That same mistake that solipsistic, that self-involved, that self-contained view of the world, which the Dor HaPalaga exhibited, also resurfaced where? With Sodom. Sodom was a culture based on the illegality of chesed. Basically, to put it another way, the people of Sodom took the idea of din, of judgment, to the ultimate degree. That you get what you deserve, and to therefore do chesed, to give somebody something, so to speak, that he doesn't deserve, destroys the world. They made a mistake. We've spoken about this in previous years, that we said that Olam chesed yaboneh, the world will be built on kindness. It says in one Chazal. Another Chazal says that Olam b'machshavto livros olam b'din, that Hashem, it arose in his mind, so to speak, in Hashem's mind, to create the world with din, with strict justice. So clearly here there's a contradiction, a stira. On the one hand, you're telling me the world's going to be built with kindness. On the other hand, you're saying that Hashem's original conception of the world should be a world of din. And it says also in that Chazal, Ra Hashem saw that the world could not be miskayim, that din alone the world would not survive. Why? Because as soon as a person did anything in the slightest bit wrong, a thunderbolt would come out from Holdem and render him non-existent. And therefore Hashem, Ola mikisei of din, he rose up from the seat of din, or Yoshav, and he sat on the kisei of Rachamim. Now Rachamim is different from Chesed. Chesed is indiscriminate. Chesed is letovim uleroyim, to the good and the bad. It's a broadcast, wide band. Rachamim, on the other hand, is only given to those who deserve it. You have to deserve Rachamim. But, getting back to our original discussion, Sodom made a mistake of understanding that the basis of the world was din, strict justice, and therefore chesed contradicted that. Now, we know that that's a mistake, because the whole purpose of din is only as a handmaiden, so to speak, to the midah of chesed. Olam chesed yiboneh. The whole reason the world exists is because Hashem wanted to do chesed. Man exists, the whole of the creation exists as a recipient for that Hashem's ratzon, to do chesed. If Hashem wants to do chesed, so there has to be an existence, there has to be a creature called man to whom that chesed is being done. Din only comes in, so to speak, after the fact. Once you have chesed, the chesed, in order to be done in the best possible way, has to be done through din. Man has to earn that chesed, because if he doesn't earn that chesed, if he gets it as a free handout, he's not going to feel good about it. As the Ramchal says, it's called nehamika desufa, the bread of shame, like a pauper who sticks his hand out for a morsel of bread. He'll put his hand out, but he'll turn his face away because he's embarrassed. Now, if that's the kind of giving that Hashem would give us, that's not the best kind of chesed. And it's axiomatic that Hashem's chesed can only be the best kind of chesed. And therefore the best kind of chesed, so to speak, demands that it's given in a way that you earn the chesed. That's where din comes in. But din by itself has no ultimate value. It's only of value to the extent that it supports, it elevates chesed. The men of Sodom understood that this is a world of din, and therefore there can be no chesed. Din means a person has to be absolutely independent. Does this sound familiar? Man has to be self-contained. Just like the Dor HaPalaga wanted to be self-contained. So the men of Sodom understood that it was also to do kindness to people. Why? Because it took away their independence. It undermined their kiyum, their very reason for being, which was to be self-sufficient, independent. So, if you put a person who takes or gives charity has no place in that world, because people deserve only what they earn, and one who asks for anything else is fighting, as they understood it, the system of the earth. The earth was given to man, and although the heavens are mashpi'im, they influence, they give sustenance, man is not created as a mashpi'ah, they claimed. Man has no right to give. If he gives, he destroys the other's independence. In other words, they repeated the mistake of the Dor HaPalaga. The Torah, of course, Hashem mixed up the language of the Dora Palaga and he destroyed Sodom, removed those two attempts to sever heaven from earth. Torah, of course, does the complete opposite. Torah scholars in the days of Chazal were called chaverim, literally friends, but chaverim is from the root chibur. Chibur means to connect. The opposite of chibur, you use the same words, is charev. Same words, chet, reish, bet. You can either destroy the world or you can connect the world. It just depends how you align those letters. The Torah has the power to overcome any shortcomings in history, and the unity of Torah, that actus of Torah, unites with all and combats all those generations who sought to divide. The nature of Torah is to connect. Korach's rebellion resulted the Zohar explains that Korach's attempt to sever heaven from earth, as we'll see, to be self-sufficient, to go back to our original medrash. What was he saying with this idea of a beged that's all techeles? We're self-contained. We don't need the input of the tzitzis. We don't need to connect. We have the technology. We have everything that we need. If we're unified, if we're together, that's all we need. It was the same mistake, focusing again. The Zohar says that Korach's attempt to sever from earth in this way was essentially an attack on Shalom. Shalom, we translate usually as peace, but Shalom is also one of Hashem's names. In fact, Shalom is not just an attribute of Hashem. Like, for example, Emet is an attribute of Hashem. It is a name with a capital N, to the extent that you cannot say the word Shalom in a bathhouse, because it's one of Hashem's name. For example, the midah, the quality of Emet, which we say, Hashem Elokeichem Emet, He's Emet, but that never doesn't rise to the level of being a name be'etzem in essence. Of course, He's Emes, and only Hashem is Emes, but you can say the word Emet, truth, in a bathhouse, since it is not one of, it's not called, there's never, it's a midah, but not a name. The Maharal, Derech Agav, asks how it is that we can erase Hashem's name in the process of a sota. A sota is a woman who has been cautioned by her husband not to, what's the word in English, to sequester herself with a certain man, and she does this, and there are witnesses that she does this, and the process then called sota, by which he brings it to the Beis Hamikdash, and part of this process involves them taking a parchment on which the name Yud Kei Vav Kei is written on a parchment, and it's dissolved in water, and she drinks the water with ashes in as well, and if the water tests her, the water, if she's in point of fact guilty, she dies a very horrible death. If she's innocent, then the unfounded suspicion of her husband means that she's blessed. If she was barren before, she has children. Many other blessings result. But the point of the question is, how is it that you can take the Shem Hashem and erase it? How is it possible that you take Yud Kei Vav Kei, the ineffable four-letter name, and you erase it? How can you do such a thing? The Maharal explains that it's not really erasing Hashem's name. Because the whole essence of the sota is to create shalom, peace between the husband and the wife. So by erasing one name, simultaneously you create another name, the name of Shalom. That's how the Maharal explains how it's possible to erase one name. Because erasing one name is really just transmuting it into another name. It's not really considered erasing the name. Man has a tremendous limitation, which we tend to grasp our own existence as essential and complete. We've talked about this in previous weeks. The nature of a person, unless he works very hard, is to see himself as the center of the universe. To see the truth of his existence as the only thing that he can really be sure of. As Descartes said, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. This can be taken to absurd lengths. I mean, it's possible for a person to honestly believe that really he's the fact that I'm here means that I have to be here. Twice a day we say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. No, I don't have to be here. Hashem has to be here. It's very easy to think, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu. Yeah, there's a God in the world, but you know something? Ani Echad. I'm here. If I'm here, I have to be here. That is the opposite of Shalom. The Midah of Shalom reveals that all of existence needs everything else. That me by myself, every aspect of existence requires an interface, a to and fro. We're not able to create our own little exclusive worlds like the Dora Palaga tried to do, like the Anshe Stom tried to do, like Korach tried to do. A beged of all techeles doesn't need to reach out. It doesn't need to extend itself beyond. An attack on the whole idea of tzitzis reaching beyond the world. Going along this theme, the Zohar explains that the concept of all creation uniting, and each facet of creation can only achieve its shleimut, its perfection, through its connection with all other facets of creation. This is what's called Shabbos. And Shabbos also is one of the names of Hashem. Shabbos, during the week we say, Ma Rabu Ma'asecha Hashem. How multitudinous are your works, Hashem. And on Shabbos we say, Ma Godlu. How great are your works, Hashem. What's the difference between Rabu, many, and Gadlu, great? As we said before, the idea of Gadlut is that which leads onwards to a final connection. Gadlut, that's these tzitzis reaching out. That's Gad Gedud Yugudenu. The focus on something beyond and outside of myself. Rabu, Rov, Ribui, just more and more and more and more. We live in an era of Ribui. More and more terabytes, and everything is more and more. This is basically Esav and Yaakov. Esav spoke of the multitudes of his possession, and he said, Yesh li Rav, I've got a lot. I have much. Esav's Rav is a much which never will come to Kol. Yaakov says, Yesh li Kol. I have everything. Kol is perfection. Kol is Shabbos. Esav's possessions will never, they just become more and more and more. And we look at the world, we clearly see that's what's going on. Yaakov has the power to join everything together. That's the Gadlut, even though he was the younger of the two. To form a whole, to form a Shleimut, to form Shabbos. Yaakov's family numbered 70, and yet they were called one. Kol Hanefesh Lebeis Yaakov. Haba Mitzrayma Shivim. Nefesh is singular. Whereas by Esav it says, V'es Benoit. By Esav, Yikach Esav es Noshav, his wives, V'es Banov and his sons, V'es Benoisav and his daughters, V'es Kol Nefashos Beiso. Plural. He was only 6, and that they're in the plural. It's a ribui which never ever comes to Shleimus. So that's why Moshe was challenged by Korach and his supporters with the mitzvah of tzitzis, the claim of self-sufficiency. We don't need to connect outside. The same thing with the other Medrash of a house full of Sfarim needs no mezuzah. We have the technology. We're self-sufficient. Korach was ispalig. He separated himself. In a sense, Korach fought against the entire creation, which, as we said, requires independency and shalom, shleimut, to leave everything, to lead everything to that Yom Shekula Shabbos. Korach took, vayikach. He took, but he didn't give. He disconnected himself from existence. He brought things to the point that he felt he needed to give nothing back. We have the technology. Kulam kadoshim. We're all holy. We don't need anything else. There's no such thing in the world. Only a person who is only mushpa, who receives and doesn't be mashpia, he removes himself from the reality. True existence requires a connection to a shalom, shalom which is Hashem, which means every detail of the creation is connected. Through the mutuality of mashpia and mushpa. The Torah commands us not to be like Korach. It's a mitzvah d'oraisa. Don't be like Korach. The Gemara explains that anyone who maintains an argument which is not for the sake of heaven violates this commandment. Hashem should save us from any connection to this mentality that we have the technology, we have the ability. I'll say something a little controversial. The whole history of Jewish secessionism, of giving up on the Torah, whether that's by founding a country or becoming a Bundist or a Yiddishist, all of those mistaken movements, they all revolve around this idea that we have the technology. All we need is the unity. We can set up our own country. It's interesting that we're in a situation now where the country is extremely divided. There can be no shalom without a reference, more than a reference, without a connection to Torah, chaverim, the chibur, which leads us to shalom. This is all illusory. All this idea of negotiation, of compromise, these are all band-aids on a huge earthquake, a huge fissure in the ground, a seismic, a San Andreas fault. There's only one shleimus, there's only one shalom, and that's Hashem. Anything that doesn't lead ultimately to Hashem is doomed to failure. Korach was the original, not the original because he comes at the end of these three mistakes, but represented the same idea. Kulam kadoshim, we're all holy. Or as George Orwell once put it, all pigs are equal. We don't need anybody else. We've received everything we need. We're fine by ourselves. You missed the point. Your job is not just to receive. Your job is to give as well. Anything which doesn't focus on the shleimus, the ultimate shleimus of connection to Hashem, will lead in the opposite direction. Will be an absolute disaster. Hashem should help that we separate ourselves from those who separate themselves and try to make false utopias built on nothing else except for the so-called unity of man while ignoring his connection to Shalom, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu.